Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I'm really glad you're joining me. So today we're doing something incredibly practical and honestly pretty empowering. We're going straight to the source to totally demystify the Missouri Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. You probably know it as SNAP and its application process. Now we're not just going to talk about abstract ideas here. We're getting right into the actual state forms and manuals. Think of me as your personal guide through this paperwork. We're going to break down all that dense bureaucratic jargon so that by the time we wrap up, you'll feel completely confident tackling this entire process.
But before we even touch a single form, let's talk about the why. Why does this matter? Well, think about this number for a second, $188. That happens to be the average monthly benefit an older adult receives right here in Missouri through SNAP. I really want you to keep that number in the back of your mind as we go through this explainer. I know, dealing with state forms can feel, well, completely overwhelming sometimes, but putting in the time to do this brings real tangible value. I mean, we're talking $188 a month for healthy groceries, fresh fruits, vegetables, meats, dairy, or hey, even seeds to grow your own food. Getting through this paperwork is literally the gateway to putting food on the table.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our game plan for today in 5 steps. First, the basics of Missouri SNAP. Second, how to start your application. Third, navigating those tricky household income details. Fourth, the interview and approval process. And finally, step 5, keeping your SNAP benefits once you have them. All right, let's kick things off with section 1, the basics of Missouri SNAP.
You know, SNAP isn't just a food program, it's a really vital tool that frees up your limited cash for other absolute necessities. We're talking utility bills, essential prescriptions, or getting medical care without having to sacrifice your nutritional health. And the whole journey to get this set up really boils down to 4 main milestones. First up, you submit your application. Second, you have a mandatory phone interview with a state eligibility specialist. Third, you wait for the state's decision, which usually takes up to 30 days. And fourth, your final destination, you get your EBT card in the mail. And that card, it works just like a prepaid debit card at your local grocery store or even on Amazon.
Moving right along to section 2, starting your application.
Now, I totally get that staring at a blank government form can definitely induce some anxiety. But what's really interesting here is that you don't actually need to have all your paperwork perfectly sorted just to get the ball rolling. You can send your form back in a few official ways. Upload it online at mymdssupload.mo.gov, mail it to Jefferson City, fax it, or just drop it off in person. The big secret here is locking in what the state calls your filing date. Your benefits are actually calculated from the exact day the state receives your application, as long as it has your name, address, and signature. So look, even if you haven't tracked down every single pay stub quite yet, just get that form submitted to lock in your date.
As you get into section 2 of the application, there's this really important micro-narrative going on. It's basically a safety net inside the safety net. If you find yourself in an extreme financial emergency, the state can actually speed up your processing to just 7 days instead of the usual 30. So how do you qualify for that? Well, if your household's monthly income is under $150 and you have less than $100 in the bank. Or, alternatively, if your combined rent and utility bills literally cost more than your total cash on hand and income for that month. If you can check yes to those situations, it triggers that expedited 7-day service.
Okay, on to section 3, navigating household income details. This is where we get a bit into the weeds, but stick with me.
So, as we get into the meatiest part of the paperwork, we really have to clarify what the state actually means by household. The form is going to ask you to list everyone living at your address, but, and this is key, you only mark yes in the buy and eat column for the people you actually buy food, cook, and eat with. It's a huge distinction. The state cares about who is sharing the meals, not just who is sharing the roof. Oh, and here is a very important note straight from the rulebook. Establishing paternity is absolutely not required to get SNAP benefits. Do not let that stop you from applying for your family.
Now, this brilliantly illustrates how the state does the math. They essentially look at your finances like a balancing act. On one side, they tally up your countable income. That's money from jobs, Social Security, child support, SSI, things like that. But on the other side, they weigh your critical, deductible expenses. They want to know what you're shelling out for rent, utilities, childcare, and incredibly, if you are 60 or older or disabled, they even deduct your unreimbursed medical expenses. It's the balance between the money coming in and these specific bills going out that determines your final benefit amount. When you hit section 5 of the application, this is exactly where you're going to plug in those details. They want to know stuff like, if someone's income just stopped, you'll need to list the date and amount of that very last paycheck. They give you handy little checkboxes for your heating and cooling bills, which directly affect your utility deductions. And right there on the form, there's a specific space to list those doctor copays, Medicare premiums, and even transportation costs for medical care if you qualify for that deduction. Seeing it systematically laid out like this really makes the whole thing feel so much more manageable, doesn't it?
Moving forward, Section 4, the interview and approval.
So once you've submitted your application and you've got that filing date locked in, you enter this sort of post-application phase where you have to verify everything you just wrote down. So the crucial point is this: if you put a phone number on your application, the Family Support Division is going to try to call you the very next business day after your application is registered in their system. The application explicitly states that picking up this phone call is the absolute fastest way to get your mandatory interview out of the way. If you miss it, you're going to have to call their 855 number, probably wait on hold, or check down to an office in person. So seriously, keep your phone close. Also during this phase, you are attesting to the Household Declarations and Notices sections. We definitely need to talk about this because at the end of the day, this is a legally binding document. The fraud rules are super strict, guys. You absolutely cannot buy or sell SNAP benefits for cash. You can't use them for non-food stuff like alcohol or cigarettes. And you certainly cannot lie or hide information to get the benefits. The penalties here are no joke. They range from a 1-year disqualification for a first offense all the way to permanent bans. In major trafficking cases, they can even hit you with fines up to $250,000 or actual prison time. It's serious business, so honesty is 100% paramount.
All right, our final section, Part 5, keeping your SNAP benefits.
Let's see how this builds. Because once you're approved and get that EBT card in the mail, the journey isn't totally over. Keeping your access requires some pretty strict calendar management so you don't suddenly face a lapse in your food assistance. According to the DSS manual, if you have a standard certification period, let's say it's for a year, the system automatically shoots out a notice of expiration on the 15th day of your second to last month. You then have to submit your recertification application by the 15th day of your last month. Now, if you happen to be on a very short, like 1 or 2 month certification, you only have 17 calendar days from the date of the notice to reapply. Trust me on this, mark these dates on your calendar the very second you get approved.
All right, let's decode some serious bureaucratic alphabet soup that pops up on the application. ABAWD. That stands for Able-Bodied Adults Without Dependents. Basically, if you fall into this bucket, meaning you're between 18 and 64, you're not disabled, and you have no children under 14 in the home, you're actually limited to receiving SNAP benefits for only 3 months within a 3-year window. That is, unless you meet a specific requirement of working or attending training for at least 80 hours a month.
And I've got to highlight a massive update you really need to be aware of. As of February 1st, 2026, the federal work rules are shifting. Adults age 55 to 64 without dependents, as well as veterans, are now also going to have to meet this 80-hour monthly work or training requirement to keep their benefits. But the good news from the manuals is that if formal jobs are tough to find where you live, volunteer work can actually count toward those 80 hours. Just be sure to coordinate closely with your local DSS office so those hours get logged correctly.
Well, we have covered a tremendous amount of ground today. We took a pretty dense bureaucratic manual and turned it into a clear, straightforward roadmap. You now know exactly how to lock in your filing date, how to accurately calculate your household expenses, and of course, the absolute critical importance of answering that next day phone call. So I want to leave you with this thought. Now that all this paperwork is totally demystified, and you know there is an average of $188 a month out there waiting to help you buy healthy food, are you ready to take that first step towards securing your nutritional safety net? If the answer is yes, head over to mydss.mo.gov and get started. Thank you so much for learning with me today, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.